Welcome back to my desk where I enjoy tackling tough questions with scholarly insight and, to be quite frank, a little bit of controversy as well. See, inside of today's conversation, we're going to dive inside of the subject that stirs up some very, very intense debate inside of the scholarly as well as churchly and just even worldly conversations that we have. Is masturbation a sin? Yep, that's right. I said it. We're going there today. And you might be thinking, this isn't your typical Bible study. And if you know me, and if you know my channel, you know that I don't do typical. Okay. But today we're focusing on a very specific biblical narrative, the narrative of Onan inside the book of Genesis, the 38th chapter, and how a lot of people actually use this text in order to argue that masturbation is sinful. But let me be clear. Today's lesson is about teaching this specific scripture from the context in which it was designed to be studied. In other words, we are not going to add anything or take anything away from the scripture. Because one of the things that I've seen over the course of my studies is that as it relates to this topic, people have added this notion of masturbation to the scripture. And that is not what is located inside of the text. That's right. Stick with me for these next couple of minutes because I can guarantee you're going to learn something. Buckle up. We're about to unravel some layers of cultural significance and also biblical interpretation that you don't want to miss. So let's jump right into it, okay? All right, let's start with the scripture. In Genesis 38, we meet a man by the name of Onan, a man whose actions led to his tragic end. He was put to death for spilling his seed on the ground. This phrase has become a lightning rod in debates about sexual ethics. But what exactly was Onan's sin? Traditionally, some readers have taken this passage to imply that any act of wasting seed, including masturbation, is sinful. But a closer look at the context reveals a very different picture. Onan's duty, according to the customs of his time, was to provide offspring for his deceased brother's line. His refusal to fulfill this familial and social obligation was the actual true offense. What if I told you that this ancient text is less about personal sexual conduct and more about the responsibilities one holds in a family and society? Stay with me because this is where things get really interesting. Now, this story, it has always resonated deeply inside of our culture. And why? For centuries, the Onan passage has been wielded as evidence in moral debates about sexual behavior. In many conservative circles, it's been a go-to text to argue that any act of spilling seed outside of procreation is inherently sinful. But let's examine the cultural context. In ancient Israelite society, maintaining the lineage and family heritage wasn't just a personal matter. It was a communal necessity. Here's the thing. Onan's failure wasn't about personal gratification. It was about defying a duty to his family and his community. His act was a deliberate rejection of his role in ensuring his brother's legacy. I want you to think about that for a moment. If the core issue of this story was disobedience to family duty rather than a universal moral decree on sexual behavior, what does that say about the application of this text inside of our modern lives? I want you to keep that question inside of your mind for a minute. Over time, many have extrapolated the Onan story to address the modern issue of masturbation. The argument goes something like this. If spilling one's seed is condemned in the Bible, then any act that results in waste must be sinful. This view has found traction in various religious teachings, often accompanied by strong language and moral warnings. But here's where careful interpretation is essential. Onan's sin was not about sexual pleasure or self gratification. It was about evading a serious familial and societal obligation. It's a classic example of how cultural practices and scriptural directives can be misapplied when removed from their historical context. Here's the thing. Imagine if we applied every ancient rule to our modern lives without considering the context. How out of step would we be as it relates to studying scripture? The story of Onan invites us to look deeper, beyond the surface level interpretations that have been taken hold over the centuries. I want to reiterate a crucial point. Today, I'm not here to deliver a sermon or a teaching on whether masturbation is sinful. That's not what we're talking about. Instead, we're dissecting this scripture itself, the Onan passage, and understanding how its interpretation has evolved over time. Because truth of the matter, there is nothing inside of the Bible that directly addresses masturbation. When teaching this text, it's important to highlight that the narrative focuses on disobedience to family duty and the preservation of lineage rather than serving as a blanket statement on all sexual practices. Many modern scholars argue that using this story to condemn masturbation is a misreading of the original intent. I want you to hear that. Ask yourself, when we reference ancient texts, are we truly engaging with the original meaning, or are we overlaying our current moral framework onto them? It's a question that challenges us to re-examine our assumptions about scriptural authority. This discussion inevitably leads us to the broader implications of how scripture is interpreted. The controversy surrounding the Onan passage is emblematic of a larger trend. The tension between historical context and modern moral debates is really up for question here. It's a reminder that the Bible, like any ancient document, must be read with an understanding of its time, its culture, and its purpose. Some argue that every mention of spilling seeds should be taken as a caution, as a caution against all forms of sexual release outside of procreation. Others believe that such interpretations ignore the narrative's deeper commentary on social responsibility and duty. Here's the thing. If you're passionate about both your faith and your intellectual curiosity, consider this. What if our approach to scripture could evolve to embrace more nuanced interpretations rather than sticking rigidly to outdated moral prescriptions? I invite you to reflect on this and share your thoughts with our community. And wrapping up today's conversation, I want you to remember that the Onan narrative is rich with cultural significance, but also has a lot of complexity to it. It reminds us that ancient texts often carry layers of meaning that can be easily oversimplified or misapplied in modern debates. My aim today has been to illuminate the scripture itself, not to dictate personal moral choices. Now, before we sign off, I want to hear from you. What do you think about Onan's story? Go and read it. Go and read it yourself. How do you interpret its message inside of today's context? Put your thoughts inside of the comments or reach out to me, because here your voice is a crucial part of an ongoing conversation. And of course, if you enjoyed this deep dive inside the biblical text and cultural interpretation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment, share this with friends who appreciate challenging discussions like this. And I want you to stay tuned for more conversations like this from my desk, where I explore faith history and the complex interplay between them. Until next time, Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeking truth. I'm Dr. Dandridge. Thank you for joining me at my desk.